Welcome to week 6, where we're going to talk a little bit about some of the technology that's used. Primarily where this particular week had started out in the previous versions of this course, we're talking about specific accelerators for traditional relational data warehousing. But again, over the years, we've seen this move from being more relational focused to a lot of unstructured, semi-structured type of data, so non-SQL and semi-structured SQL or semi-structured storage medias such as JSON formats, for instance. Going into this week, do not approach it from, again, that traditional data warehousing view. Think about it as holistically all the different types of solutions which we've been talking about and studying up to this point. So there'll be some things where cloud and some of the cloud services that are available, some of the databases, data services that are available in the cloud would make a lot more sense than maybe going with a data warehouse appliance. Where I would see some good cut points would be if most of your data is relational data, then maybe a traditional Oracle or a MySQL, SQL Server type of relational database may get the job done. As those needs kind of expand and your data starts to get larger and larger, it'll overwhelm some of those systems very easily. That's where things like Exadata and Oracle, Greenleaf, Netezza, Teradata, these data warehouse appliances really started to shine. And then from that, that's when we started seeing more and more things were put up into cloud instances. And so some of the data services which come to bear in AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, etc., can really be of an advantage to you. So as you go into this, I want you to think about this from all these different types of solutions that are out there. When you're just answering the questions, don't just answer it from one perspective. Kind of think through your specific situation and where you see the areas that are of most interest to you as you study this very broad topic of different types of technologies. Now, the specific questions which you have to answer for this week is talk about what some of those changes are. Now, Inman mentioned some of those. There's actually again in these other texts which we also provide. You also have some of these, Gorlick, etc. Has some additional things that you want to consider when you're looking at those types of technologies. Secondly, let's talk about the types of storage. What type of storage would be appropriate? That goes back to what kind of data are you storing? Are you storing a lot of unstructured data, semi-structured, or structured data? And the types of storage have very, very different types of costs that go along with it. So if you're storing large amounts of data in the cloud, for instance, the storage of that would be relatively inexpensive, but the transport to get it in and out of that storage, so if you're taking it out of that storage or putting it into that storage, those can be huge cost factors that you should consider. Describe what a NoSQL database is. So that's the unstructured type of data. You could talk about from a perspective of a document store database. There's a whole different kinds of, key value pair. There's a whole number of different kinds of NoSQL databases that are out there. So just kind of describe what that NoSQL database is and a little bit more detail. Now we talk about resource contention. Now Inman discusses it specifically in this area, but it's also in the Gorlick text. They talk about managing resource contention, hardware components, memory processing, etc. There are even some separate criteria that are presented in several of the readings that kind of go into a little bit more detail on that. So I want you to provide a critical analysis of some of those decision points. If you were going down this path, what would be some of the things that you would consider? Metadata is a huge part of success of one of these solutions. So, what's the value of metadata? How would you have that what would be the value of that or the impact of that as you're evaluating a technology decision? Those are some of the things you should reflect for question 5. Question 6 talks about test environments. So, what would be some of the reasons why you would have a test environment? How many test environments do you have? What kind of impact would that have on a hardware selection if you're looking at various testing strategies? So there's a lot that could go into that particular question. Again, kind of just go around with your solution, but also kind of think of what would be the most important things that you would want to pull out if you were looking at testing environments, and just discuss that briefly. And then finally, let's talk about this checklist. So what we're looking for this final piece is a checklist of things that, hey, you're evaluating a new technology. What would be the specific things that you would look for? So the rest of these would be more of the traditional paragraph or a couple of paragraphs to go into it, to describe what's going on and what's the pieces of it. For this here, that's really looking for a checklist. So I'm sitting down and I'm saying, yeah, I'm thinking about building out a new warehousing system, or I'm building out a new enterprise data hub cloud solution to address my data needs. What are some of those technology things that I should consider? And just list those out. And I would ask again, be as specific as possible. So this shouldn't be a list of like 3 or 4 things. It could be a quite extensive list. Now, probably 2 pages worth of bullet points is probably a little bit much, so somewhere in between the two of those. This should be probably the easiest part of the whole assignment, but just think of what are those technology touch points that you would want to make sure that you check off as you are evaluating a new technology. Now, this is also a part of the course where we're 6 weeks into the course at this point. We've got a 15-week course, so at this point, you should really be getting kind of solidified on what your final capstone project is going to be. So you should be thinking about what kind of an organization. It could be either your organization, or you could choose an organization from online, make up an organization. But let's have an organizational construct and say, what's going to be your data needs? What's going to be the thing that you would want to pitch? So do you currently have a data warehouse? Would you want to upgrade that data warehouse? Do you have very little, like small little relational databases, and you want to have that into more an enterprise data hub? Are you considering modernizing your applications, your digital presence, and going with a cloud implementation, which could be quite large? Or you want to do maybe a proof of concept first, and then explore and make future decisions based off of what you see in that proof of concept? These are all valuable things that you could do as that final capstone project. But at this point, you should really start kind of thinking of the organizational context, what you want to do in that space. Next couple weeks, we'll kind of get a little bit more firm on that. But this is really a turning point in the course where we start moving away from some of the theoretical pieces of it to the application pieces of it. So at this point, I'm really asking, try to firm up on what your final project is going to be about, what organization. And if you're struggling, reach out and we'll work through that kind of together. We'll talk through some options there together. So any other questions come up, please reach out on the forums. Come to the office hours. Again, office hours for this class are 7 o'clock Eastern on Tuesdays and 8 o'clock Eastern on Thursdays. I also have one-on-one sessions if there's any specific items. Those are not mandatory. Those are ask me anything type of sessions. So if you have questions, feel free to show up. I'll be happy to answer them. If that time frame does not work for you, and you'd like some one-on-one time, I can schedule those as schedule allows. And then also reach out on the forums, reach out in email to me if you have specific questions. But should be an interesting week. If you have anything, just reach out. Have a good one. Thanks.